All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of uh, Illustration Masterclass. Today, I'm going to be looking at another artist who I'm going to have trouble pronouncing their name, as usual. All the best artists have names that are difficult for me to pronounce. Bayard Wu, I believe that's how it is that you pronounce this gentleman's name. Um, this guy, I came across him on ArtStation. And as soon as I came across him, I was like, oh man, I got to look at this guy's art. I got to share him with the people that look at this channel because this guy is insanely good. And he's into this dark fantasy aesthetic that I'm really big into. And if you've been following my channel, I assume that you would be as well. So let's go ahead and let's dig into some of the things we see in this work. So these are obviously from like client jobs, I assume. I mean, this looks like something for maybe not Blizzard, but for yeah, maybe it is for Blizzard because it looks like we have the Diablo head right here, and then we have this board of like this Warcraft sort of thing going on, and Starcraft elements over here. So I assume this is for Blizzard, although I'm not 100% sure. But regardless, the thing that jumps out at me at first is that we have this really nice balance between symmetrical and asymmetrical elements going on in the illustration that makes it really dynamic, right? Like you have this element here of this swooping curve that we've talked about in previous episodes that we have this converging line where the lines are kind of implied and your mind completes the shape, right? So we have like the C that's turned up like this, and we can imagine that this is an incomplete circle and our mind completes it by going over this gap. And so he's using this shape right here in order to keep our eyes focused in on the focal point. As we go into the focal point, we start to see the creative decisions that the artist is making here, which is something that I've talked about previously when it comes to storytelling and illustration, storytelling and art. You have these elements of um, storytelling where something is about to happen. You know, typically when you look at like the master illustrators, they typically illustrate a moment right before something is about to happen or right after something is going to happen, because those are the moments that have the most drama to them. And by that I mean the the viewer is drawn more into the image by portraying something that is about to happen, such as this guy is about to hit this guy with an axe, but then the other guy's got a sword and he's about to swing on the orc. This kind of dynamic between these two of they're about to strike but they haven't yet invites the viewer's imagination to again complete the image. Just in the same way that this circle here, uh, our mind is filling in the details by completing that rotation of the circle, and it gives our eye a kind of a path to follow. Just in that same way, this is also inviting us into the illustration because it requires our imagination to complete the image in a sense, right? Because you're looking at the image and your mind immediately starts to tell a story about what it is that's actually going on here. And so this is something that I think is pretty interesting about fantasy illustration in general, is that there's this very strong storytelling component. And so everything has to be in support of that, you know. And so if we look at just the gesture of like this dog, this wolf, and then we look at the gesture of the horse, right? And then we look at the gesture of this guy. We can start to see that there's a general flow that things follow. You know, the horse is flowing, the converging lines are flowing in the same direction as this is flowing, right? And we have the same thing here, right? All of these things are flowing in a certain direction. Now, the other thing is to understand that there's a lot of really good organizational elements going on here. We have this background figure back here that's dropped into a lower value range. And the way it is that you can think about that is that our focal point is going to have the most contrast to it. So if I turn this layer off, if this layer wants to turn off, well, my computer is not wanting to respond. Let me try that again. Okay. So if I turn the layer that I have drawn off, if you look at our focal point, which is obviously these two figures on their animals fighting, we see that there's a great contrast between the different values. Okay, there's a lot of contrast going on there within the values itself. I'm curious, can I drop that into? No, that's not going to work. Let me go ahead and drop this into a grayscale, and then you'll see what I'm saying. Well, computer might not want to. I think we'll just have to move on from this one. My computer is not wanting to cooperate now. But we can see the same sort of thing happening here, and we can see that there's a number of different things that the artist is doing in this particular illustration that is creating some interesting effects. For one, we see the same sort of thing going on of this main focal point. There's a lot of contrast within the value range itself, right? So yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll try that again. We will fill, just so I can show what it is that I'm talking about. All right, so I fill this, that. I'm going to drop this into the right blending layer. Okay, so now that I've got it in grayscale, let's look at it again. So what it is that I mean is pretty clearly there is a stronger contrast between this darkest dark that is here in the shadows of this figure laying on the ground and the lightest light that is here of the light illuminating it. And then obviously there is a stronger contrast. There is a wider gap between this dark and this light, right? And the same thing goes here. There's more contrast in these darks and the lights in the background. Whereas when we look towards the background, the values in general are closer together. So if we pull up the color wheel here and I just sample from this dark, we can see that it's pretty far down here, but if I move up and I touch one of the lights, it doesn't go all the way into the light, right? There's a certain range, so it seems to stick around in this middle range here, whereas the elements of contrast in the image, he saves the further parts of the darkest part of the image and the lightest part of the image. He saves those for where he wants your eye to look, right? And then we have other little tricks it is that he's using here. There's obviously a great deal of drama in the image, but we have like this strong flowing lines that go here and they're pointing us up, and this is flowing with this dragon face, right? And then we have this moment of this thing exploding off of them, right? Nice silhouette with these spikes behind it, and then we have a great example of how to incorporate both a foreground element as well as a background element, right? So in the background here, we have these dragons fighting in the air, and he's using value to show us that there is quite a great distance between this foreground and this middle ground element in the background by the way it is that he's using the values, right? Like we talked about, the values are much closer together, so therefore there's less contrast in the top right of the image. And they almost start to blend in value-wise with the clouds in the sky. This keeps us from immediately looking up and to the right. So he keeps our eye on the focal point, which is this orc, and then this dragon that's bursting out of these chains, right? So we have another element, which is the front left wing, that is a very dark element that creates a kind of a C shape that holds the silhouette of the dragon. But he also is doing something which is a depth of field effect it is that you get whenever it is that you have a camera and you have a camera that is um, focused in on a specific focal point. The things that are closer to the camera are going to fall out of focus. And so he's able to, if you look at the edges of the dragon itself, in the body of the dragon, in the body of the dragon, and all of the details, the edges are very sharp, right? And it cuts out a very clear silhouette of the dragon itself. But then the wing that's closest to us, it has much more of a blur effect, so therefore the edges are not as visible. So let's go ahead and let's move on to the next one. But those are some good tricks of the trade that I see a lot of illustrators use. Again, we have these same sort of things, right? Like we have a blur element that's going on down here, and we have this blur element that's in the foreground of all the different elements on the ground. We have groupings of shadows here in the background that have less contrast within themselves, as opposed to these midground elements where we have the actual action, right? And notice that it all fits together as like a silhouette. Like these characters are crashing into one another, and I mean, it looks awesome. It's just super epic. Let's go ahead and let's move on to the next one because I want to wrap up this one pretty quickly. Yeah, I mean, just beautiful, beautiful work. I love the fantasy elements of stuff like this. The character designs in these war scenes. I mean, they feel like something out of a Frazetta painting, right? And we'll go ahead and we'll end it on this one. Just because I feel compositionally and color-wise it's so unique from the other stuff that this artist has done that we've looked at. Um, you know, when we look at an illustration, you know, we can begin to see the process that the artist went through by looking at it from a distance and imagining that this is just a tiny sketch, right? This is a tiny sketch that started in this artist's notebook, and then they developed it into a full illustration. And you can see from just from this perspective that it's very clearly readable what it is that's going on in this image. And not only is it very clearly readable, but there's clearly an emotion that is being communicated in the image. And that emotion of, you could say, mystery, of maybe sensuality, of fantasy, that mixture of those different things that is what draws us towards like fantasy art and the fantastic and the imaginative art. Um, it draws us towards the image. And then the more and more it is that we look at the image and the closer that we get, the more of the storytelling comes through, right? And so that's an effective illustration. This is an artist that really understands composition and how to arrange these different elements in a way that is visually captivating to a viewer. So anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to continue to do these weekly. I do these like way ahead of time. So if you drop a comment, let me know who you would like for me to look at next. Let me know, but it might take me a little while to get to sharing their work. If you're interested in checking out my own work, um, all of my work, my illustrations, and my comics and stuff are down in the description box below. And I thank you guys for watching, and take care.